Thank you for joining us here at IPL Radio this afternoon. You are listening to Peter, Fatima and Geoff. We're having a great old time in here. We're having some great conversations when the music's on. And then we bring everybody into it. Fatima's here dancing. We're having a wonderful time. Now, Geoff, we want another one of your gems, please. Can you fire away?
Thank you, Peter. I will do the best I can. It's actually a bit of a bushy one, this one, and it's called With Not the Trace of a Tear. It's actually sort of pretty much written about an old mate of mine that he's a farmer from over the east, and he'd done it pretty tough over the years, and I asked him one day if he had ever thought of selling up and moving into town, and this was pretty much his answer. I'll never leave the farm, you know, while my arse still points to the ground. But of late I've been friggin' well tempted, what with costs going up and milk and meat going down. It's getting harder every friggin' year. It's a famine, but seldom a feast. And with the rising cost of water, will it ever friggin' will cease? 'Cause it's the fault of those bloody greenies, you know, them tree huggers from down the Big Smoke. They wouldn't know a cow from a dingo. You wouldn't find one who's a decent bloke. And since they voted that Turnbull bloke in, it's going to get worse, you know. That friggin' Silvertail from bloody Vaucluse, he won't give us cockies a go. As long as his millionaire mates can buy the missus a new Merc each year, he'll be happy to see the man on the land struggle to buy a coal beer. Then he leaned against an old box tree and rolled a quirly with one hand, while he scratched his nuts with the other like a true blue man of the land. Ooh. And he hitched up his faded blue dungers and tucked in his flannelette shirt. He wasn't as young as he used to be. He was stooped. You could see his back hurt. And he told me it was all of that lumping of wheat bags out west and wrestling a plough, digging post holes with a crowbar. He said, thank Christ they don't use them now. Yeah, it's always been tough for the man on the land, like before my time in the Depression. And God knows how many floods and droughts, plus bushfires and bloody recessions. And back in the 50s, the rabbit plague hit. There were millions of the little swines. And before that, the prickly bear wiped them out. But I was just a kid at the time. And if OH&S was around in those days, young fella, nothing would have ever got done. Us old-time cockies put our life on the line from dawn till the going down of the sun. Because the law of the cockie's life those days was to get the friggin' job done. Wasn't how you bloody did it, as long as it got bloody done. Now there's bylaws and procedures and unions and things, safety officers and all sorts of rules. You can't even friggin' well think for yourself. It's all run by boffins and fools. No, life wasn't easy back then, young man, and I guessed he was talking to me, because there was nobody else around the place, not as far as I could see. And he relit his fag that was all wet on the end and yelled at his blue-eeler dog. Then he grabbed his shovel and cut the head off a snake that emerged from an old hollow log. I reckon I've killed 1,000 of those bastards since we bought this friggin' old farm. The bush is full of them, you know. I've seen some as thick as my arm. Then he leaned against an old box tree and rolled a log cabin with one hand while he scratched his nuts with the other, like a true blue man of the land. Then a half-sad look appeared on his face, and what I first thought was a faint hint of a tear, as he looked wistfully out over his kingdom and remembered the failures and fears. But the faintest of smiles then appeared in his eyes as his memory also revealed the elation, the joy, the taste of content, sometimes fleeting, but now oh so real. Then he relit his fine cuts, the half-inch that was left, and yelled at his blue-eeler mate, "Come on, fellow, we better get home. Mum will panic if we're not home by 8. Then he fired up the rusty old Nissan, headed home for a shower and tea, and studied the latest stock report while his grandson sat on his knee. Then he settled back in his lounge chair as he had for 50-odd years and quietly dozed by the fire with not the trace of a tear. That's it.
Oh, thank you, Geoff. That was that was just terrific.
Thanks,
Geoff, you are an old bushie, aren't you?
Well, I've never been a farmer, Peter, to be honest.
Yeah,
and I'm probably not all worried about that. They're tough game, tough game.
Where are you from originally?
From New South Wales, a little place called Barham on the Murray River on the New South Wales side, probably about 200 mile, I think, if I remember, from on the south side of Albury, between Echuca and Swan Hill, if you know the area at all.
I do. It's a beautiful area there.
Well, it is a good
I've
area.
camped on the banks of the Murray River at Echuca and watched the cockies nesting of a night and things like that. It's an absolutely beautiful place. It's wonderful.
Yeah, we had it was a very small little town, but I don't know what year, but a long time back, when poker machines came in, and they built this massive RSL club right on the bank of the river there, a town of 1,200 people. And the people from Melbourne and everywhere used to come there in droves on buses and that.
That's because the poker machines weren't in Victoria, but they were in New South Wales. So all along the border sprung up these poker machine palaces, I think they used to be called, weren't they?
Yeah, and they spent lots of money. And
bus tours, busloads of people had come up from Melbourne for the day and overnight and play the pokies. Yeah.
And that was sort of the heart of the town, really, and it did produce a lot of money and people in work and barmen and people like that. So it was a good thing. Yeah, but it was a great little place. But me and my wife both come from there, and were born and bred there in a bush nursing home, which no nurses those days, or no doctors, are like not easy to get. Or to
just
find,
a nurse or a midwife or something like that, or
that?
A nurse or a midwife or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway,
Now that's an awesome poem.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty true. There's a bit of poetic license in everything, I suppose. But
Oh, you can't stand in the way of a good yarn, can you?
That bloke actually lives. Jim Whelan's his name, and he's still a good mate of mine, and big.
And as he rolls this on this hand and scratches his with the other.
And a character,
as you do.
Character.
You might be able to relate to that, Fatima. I'm sorry, but us blokes can. You got to wake up in the morning. Let's have a bit more music, and we'll hear from Queen.